Member for Brennan, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise tonight to talk to the estimates process that we have just undertaken for the last 2 weeks, but also going back to the original budget that the Treasurer handed down early May. And I want to just remind Territorians and those here in the chamber that this budget, which he delivered, was responsible, it was transparent, it was realistic, and it was for Territorians. And we all have heard time and time again that we inherited a debt of $11 billion. So in coming into government, we had to make some really tough decisions because, Madam Speaker, that's what a government does. It makes tough decisions so that it can govern for the whole of the Northern Territory. And so listening here today with some of the commentary from various members across the chamber, I absolutely need to put on record that some of the things that are being said are absolutely outrageous. We had the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙇𝙬𝙍 basically accusing the government of being anything but transparent, talking about like gotcha moments that we were trying to get, basically saying that we were lacking in answers of all the questions, which I find astounding because he's actually talking about the government that he was part of when he was the Attorney General. That is what we experienced in opposition for 4 long years. Listening to their non-ministers, their government members, filibust for hours and hours on end, not to mention the actual ministers who at one stage, one of them brought a football in and was throwing that around the room, which was absolutely disgraceful. And that was the kind of ministers and government we had under Labor for that last 4 years when we were in opposition. So, Member for 𝙍𝙬𝙬𝙍, I just do not agree with the fact that you thought we were getting gotcha moments. And actually a couple of the members on the other side talked about the fact that the backbenchers of the government were time wasting. That's not true at all. And I think I remember the chair quoting some numbers about how out of the whole entire day, which was 12 hours worth, I think the government members asked 20 minutes worth of questions. And Madam Speaker, MLAs in the government also have their democratic right to represent Territorians and ask those questions. So I think that 20 minutes out of 12 hours a day is not a great deal of time. So I don't think we were filibustering in the way that certainly the member for 𝙍𝙬𝙬𝙍 and the member for Johnson talked about how we did that. The other part of it I heard was that they thought that ministers were also time wasting with answering those questions. I mean, estimates is a time when the opposition asks questions and the minister goes through those answers, and then of course we have our officials with us from the departments who add to the contribution, and that's how it works, and it always has worked. And I don't think any of the ministers were overly explaining their answers. I mean, we were trying to get to the bottom. At one stage, I feel like I was asked the same question 3 or 4 times because they didn't like the answer that I gave. And I heard that time and time again throughout the estimates process. And the thing is, just because you don't like the answer, it doesn't mean that it's not the answer. So I think the fact that that's a bit misleading in terms of how that's been represented about the government. A few other parts about the budget and about the estimates was this whole accusation of all these cuts and not delivering on all these promises. I mean, we have been in government for 10 months. So saying we're not delivering on promises, they obviously haven't been listening, and I will go through shortly all of the things we have delivered. But when it comes to having to reprioritise a huge budget deficit, we saw a program when we came to government, an infrastructure program, which had $5 billion worth of projects on it, which were just wish list projects. Every time Labor made an announcement in a particular part of the Northern Territory, they just threw it in the program, said we'll worry about that later. There was never any money allocated to those projects. In fact, I heard the Deputy Chief Minister say there was $319 million of the $5 billion that had been allocated, which is 3 projects across the Northern Territory in the next 12 months. So of course we have to make tough decisions. Of course every dollar we have has to count, and we make no apologies for that. Madam Speaker, the accusations about Dawn House, I mean, none of us want to see women rocking up to shelters and being turned away. That is horrific. But this is not a new problem. We have been experiencing this, and it has been escalating for years and years and years. The previous government did very little to address this. They actually watered down the laws when it comes to domestic violence perpetrators. And then we have members of the opposition accusing us of not supporting the shelters. The minister was very clear in her answers about Dawn House, that she had met with Dawn House. She met with them straight after the budget. She notified them of the changes on the 13th of June, so setting the record straight there. And that she said really clearly during estimates, and I was listening in as well, that she was working with them to ensure that they could actually provide the services they need to, and they can expand because it is needed. And let's not forget, not only were they watering down domestic violence laws, this particular Dawn House funding sat on the reverted works on this infrastructure program for years and years and years and years. So do not come in here and tell us that we don't care about domestic violence. It's absolutely shameful. We're the ones that brought in domestic violence changes so that there was mandatory sentencing, that we expanded the victims register, we increased the victims levy by 40%. That's our government that's done that. We care more about domestic violence than any other government has so far.
Order. Can we stop the interjections from both sides?
When it comes to answering of the questions, and I just want to pick up on some of the things the member for Nightcliff was saying about gas and the territory coordinator, because I don't think she realises that we need to rebuild the economy, because we've had 8 years of Labor trashing it and it going backwards year after year after year. The way we rebuild our economy is through things like gas, through things like development, which the territory coordinator needs to do. How are we going to fund police, health, housing, education, domestic violence, which we just spoke about, if we don't have a strong economy? The way we do that is through gas, mining, agriculture, tourism, and of course we need the territory coordinator. And I'm telling you right now, Member for Nightcliff, you can ask in this House until you're blue in the face about why we're spending this much on this and this much on that. We will not make no apologies for spending money and making the decisions on the territory coordinator, on gas, because we need to rebuild the economy.
Order.
We are not going to accept the status quo.
Injecting.
We came into government elected overwhelmingly with a huge majority to make changes, because we're not going to accept the status quo. We're here to change the territory for the better, rebuild the economy, restore our lifestyle, which had been devastated by crime, so we have to reduce crime too. And that's exactly what we've done in the last 10 months. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the fact that we heard the opposition a few times today say that they didn't get time to ask questions. I mean, the outputs are all there. It's all there so they can manage their time, they can manage their questions. Like I said before, one of those days, only 20 minutes out of 12 hours was taken up by government MLAs, which are very important questions that they wanted to ask. So it really is about the opposition that was squandering the time and wasting the time and disrespecting the public servants who worked so very hard to put all of that work together so that they were ready for their ministers to answer all those questions. In fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in my portfolios, we didn't even get to half of the independent commissioners. We didn't get to tourism, hospitality, major events, parks and wildlife and racing, which includes, of course, hospitality, liquor, gaming, all of those things. Like, we didn't get to have one question asked of us.
Order. Member for Blaine.
All of that work. So the other part I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, which is absolutely unbelievable. Labor still can work out from opposition a way to waste Territorians' money. They came to the ministers in written questions in March, asking like pages and pages and pages of questions about whole-of-government agency-related questions. The department spent all the time going through and getting all those answered. They went back to the opposition. And then 3 months later, I don't know how much changes in 3 months. These guys had 8 years and didn't change very much. In fact, they made it worse. They asked the same lot of questions to every agency. Actually, no, Mr. Deputy Speaker, every single agency except education. Go figure. Maybe they don't care as much about education as they say. So,
Order.
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
Thank you.
The asking of those questions twice actually cost Territorians $417,000 each time. So that times two. Still wasting Territory taxpayers' money. That is something we won't do, and we won't do
Order.
a
Member for
review.
𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙬𝙎, you were heard in silence. Let the minister be heard in silence too, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. They don't like to hear the truth, because this is also a previous government under Labor who loved a review for the sake of a review. They used to review reviews. It was constant. Nothing ever got done. All they did was talk about it. So when it comes to the racism review, which everybody seems to be so up in arms about over there on that side, we have this racism review, which was promised by the previous Chief Minister for the Anti-Discrimination Commission to do. It's $300,000. This is after police have already employed someone to deal with racism within the police. She's already started all that work. Basically, Mr Deputy Speaker, we're just getting on with the job. We want to make sure that we don't have racism in our police and other areas right across the Territory, and there's some work to be done there. We all acknowledge that. We all sat here about a month ago and explained that that's what we saw and we needed to work on. But it doesn't mean we need to do a million reviews on it. And we had to use that $300,000, talked about having to come to government, making tough decisions. That's exactly what we did. We had legal aid facing an absolute crisis because of NAJA's legal crisis. And so NAJA, legal aid, all having crises, victims taking even longer to have justice, defendants not being able to be represented in courts. Guess what? We had to use that $300,000 to fund legal aid. And we did that. We made that decision. And I make no apologies for that whatsoever. We have to get on with the job. We have to keep going. And if that means that we change things, that's exactly what we're here to do. We were elected to change things, and we make no apologies for that. So, Mr Deputy Speaker, the other part I wanted to talk about was the fact that we've had, in my Attorney General's portfolio specifically, we had the years and years of Labor watering down laws. I talked about domestic violence before. And we've had years and years of neglecting our courts. And we have come into government and we've started strengthening all the laws. We've had Declan's Law, we've had the bail laws, the strongest in the nation now. We've had more powers for police for public drinking. We've had post and boast laws. We've had mandatory assaults against workers, ram raids. The list goes on. And there are numbers there that support the fact that what we're doing is starting to work. Post and boast, for example, there's been 7 people charged. Guess what? That's 7 people that would not have been charged under Labor. They now have consequences for their actions, because we do not want people going around committing crimes and then posting about it on social media. That is absolutely disgusting. The victims in those cases just go through more and more and more trauma, and that is not okay under our watch. Goodness. I mean, what about the no money in the budget for Alice Springs that we were accused of just a few moments ago by the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙬𝙎? I mean, honestly, we have done more for Alice Springs in the last 10 months than Labor did in the last 8 years. They had extra police go down, they had South Australian police go down. All the laws that we're changing that I've already spoken about, guess who that helps? Alice Springs. That's what we needed. They absolutely need it. They've got a lot of There's a lot of work to be done right across the Territory, Mr Deputy Speaker. You cannot change 8 years of no consequences, no accountability and criminals walking around the streets because Labor didn't care about that. And remember, they thought that jailing was failing. Well, guess what? Bailing's failing as well. So we fixed that, unlike you, who did not fix it. You let it go out of control. You let the crime crisis...
Point of order. Sorry, member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙬𝙎.
The point of order, Mr Speaker, the Attorney General is misleading. Standing Order 110 relevant. She's misleading Parliament. It's the Deputy Chief Minister who said jailing is failing. And what, are you going to be offended by another glass of water?
Take your seat. Take your seat. Continue, Minister.
I thought that the member for 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙬𝙎 had a shirt that was jailing is failing. Pretty sure. I've seen it. I think I've seen him out the front of this house. Jailing is failing. Well, we are strengthening the laws, we're investing in our courts, which are so neglected, we're looking at reducing those remand days because victims need justice earlier. We don't want it to be in the hundreds and hundreds, which it has been under Labor for a very long time. And we will keep doing that. Mr Deputy Speaker, and we will keep answering the questions. We will keep making the changes to be a transparent government, to be able to answer those questions. We were the government that brought back scrutiny committees. We were the government that extended the debate time for petitions so that Territorians could be heard in the parliament. We were the ones that brought in the lobbyist register. I don't know how much more transparent we need to be, but we will continue that because we make no apologies for the changes that we're making right across the territory. We were elected to reduce crime, to rebuild the economy and to restore our lifestyle. And we will continue to do that work, and we do not apologise for the changes we are making. We will keep delivering that. We've already delivered so much in that time, and we're not stopping. This is not a set and forget. We've got another 3.5 years to go through to actually start to see some real results for Territorians. All they wanted for so long was for a government that listened and that could deliver on their promises. And we're doing that. We are absolutely doing that. And we're happy to be questioned about it, and we were questioned about it for 60 whole hours, and we answered all those questions. I'm pretty sure there weren't that many questions taken on notice either, which was a pretty good result considering there's a lot of information that is available to be asked, and it's up to the opposition to manage their time to be able to ask those questions. So I think we have been able to deliver a responsible, transparent, realistic budget for Territorians. We will continue to answer the questions, and we'll continue to make the changes, and we'll continue to not apologise for those changes, because Territorians deserve a government which they can listen and that will act, and that will just keep on delivering for a better and safer territory for all Territorians. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.